Welcome to Fragile Bonds, to the powerful stories of family, love, loss, and the choices that shape our lives. Now let's begin today's story.
Autumn in Connecticut was a beautiful season, with tree-lined streets dyed golden. In a white-walled house tucked into a quiet residential neighborhood, Jennifer was looking through her camera's viewfinder in her home studio. As a freelance photographer, Jennifer was busy editing wedding photos that needed to be finished by the end of the week. Outside the window, her daughter Chloe was playing in the yard, gathering fallen leaves. Chloe, who had just started third grade, was a bright and kind child who always had a smile on her face. Jennifer paused her work and smiled as she watched her daughter through the window. Raising a child while working from home was never easy, but being able to watch her daughter grow up so closely was more precious than anything. Her husband David was a serious man who worked at a local bank and was steadily climbing the corporate ladder. Though he often left early on weekdays and worked late into the evening, he always made sure to spend weekends with his family. On the surface, they were a happy family wanting for nothing. The doorbell rang. Jennifer stood up and opened the door. There stood her mother-in-law Patricia, perfectly groomed as always. "Jennifer, hello. How's Chloe doing?" Patricia lived nearby and visited several times a week without fail. Jennifer welcomed her with a smile. "Chloe's playing in the yard." Once inside, Patricia headed to the kitchen as if it were her own home. Jennifer watched her from behind and let out a small sigh. The frequent visits and excessive concern from her mother-in-law sometimes left her feeling suffocated. Patricia opened the refrigerator and began checking its contents. "You need to make Chloe eat more vegetables. Nutritional balance is important for a growing child." Jennifer answered with a quiet, yes. Patricia was always like this. Even though she knew the advice came from good intentions, being told things as if her parenting was wrong secretly hurt her feelings. That afternoon, Jennifer was rushed with urgent work. A client had made a sudden revision request, and the deadline was approaching. As she stared at her computer screen, she checked the clock. Chloe's parent-child event at school started at 3. She still had time. However, she became so absorbed in her work that before she knew it, the clock showed 3:30. Jennifer jumped up in a panic, grabbed her car keys, and headed to the school. When she arrived, the event was already more than half over. Entering from the back of the classroom, she saw Chloe sitting alone. When her daughter spotted her mother, she gave a small wave. After the event ended, Jennifer apologized in the car on the way home. "I'm sorry, Chloe. Mommy was late." Chloe answered gently from the back seat. "It's okay, Mommy. You're busy with work." Her daughter's words filled Jennifer with a crushing sense of guilt. Maybe I'm not a good mother. Such thoughts swirled in the depths of her heart. A few days later, Patricia came to visit carrying a large box. "Jennifer, I'm a little late for your birthday, but I got you a present." When she opened the box, inside was a beautiful silver bracelet. It had delicate craftsmanship and sparkling gemstones. It was clearly expensive. "Something this expensive?" Jennifer said with surprise as she picked up the bracelet. "I thought it would suit you. I'm glad you're happy with it." Patricia smiled with satisfaction. The next morning, Jennifer was getting ready for a meeting with an important client. She took out the bracelet Patricia had given her from her closet drawer and held it up to her wrist in front of the mirror. The delicate silver gleamed beautifully in the morning sunlight. Just then, she heard footsteps running down the stairs. Chloe burst into the bedroom, out of breath. "Mommy, wait." Jennifer turned around in surprise. Chloe's face showed signs of distress. "What's wrong, Chloe? You'll be late for school." Chloe opened her mouth as if to say something, but immediately closed it. Her daughter's behavior was clearly strange. Jennifer crouched down to meet her daughter's eye level. "Chloe, did something happen? Tell Mommy." Chloe lowered her gaze to the floor and shook her head slightly. "It's nothing. Sorry, Mommy." With that, her daughter hurried back to her own room. Jennifer tilted her head in puzzlement, but since she didn't have time, she decided to leave without wearing the bracelet after all. For the next several days, Chloe's behavior was clearly different. The daughter who was always bright and cheerful now shut herself in her room as soon as she came home from school. Even during dinner, she didn't chat like before and seemed distracted. One night, Jennifer knocked on Chloe's door. "Chloe, may I come in?" She heard a small reply, and Jennifer opened the door. Chloe was sitting on the bed hugging her knees. Jennifer sat down next to her daughter. "You haven't seemed yourself lately. Did something happen at school?" Chloe shook her head. "No, nothing. Did you have a fight with a friend?" "No." Jennifer gently stroked Chloe's head. 8 years old was a difficult age, still wavering between childhood and adulthood. Perhaps she was confused at the threshold of adolescence. Jennifer tried to convince herself by thinking this way. However, there was one more thing that bothered her. Whenever Patricia came to visit, Chloe would always escape to her room. She used to be fond of her grandmother, but lately she seemed to avoid even seeing her face. Over the weekend, Jennifer was invited to a friend's anniversary party. Since it was a special occasion, she decided to dress up for the first time in a while. As she was choosing clothes in front of her closet, she suddenly remembered that bracelet. It was a gift Patricia had specially chosen for her. It would be inconsiderate not to have worn it even once. Jennifer took the bracelet out of the drawer and tried to put it on her wrist. Just as she was about to fasten the clasp, it happened. "Mommy, don't wear that." Chloe's scream echoed throughout the room. Her daughter ran in from the hallway and grabbed Jennifer's arm. Her face was pale, and tears welled up in her eyes. Jennifer was completely shaken. She had never seen Chloe act this way before. "Chloe, calm down. What's wrong? That bracelet is dangerous." Chloe pleaded through her tears. Jennifer pulled her daughter close and gently rubbed her back. "Dangerous? What do you mean? It's just a bracelet." "No. If you look, you'll see. Look carefully." At Chloe's desperate manner, Jennifer became worried. Her daughter knew something. And it was something that frightened her daughter this much. Jennifer took the bracelet from Chloe's hand and began examining it carefully. At first, she didn't find anything unusual. Beautiful silverwork, careful finishing, glittering small gemstones. From every angle, it was a high-quality accessory. However, when she looked closely at the clasp, there was a slight sense of something wrong. On the inside of the clasp, there was a slightly raised part. At first glance it looked like part of the decoration, but when she touched it carefully, it clearly had a different feel from the other parts. Jennifer used her nail to carefully pull on that protruding part. Then, incredibly, a small black device slid out from behind the clasp. It was about the size of a thumbnail and looked like a precision electronic device. Jennifer's hands began to tremble. What was this? Why was something like this inside the bracelet? And the next moment, she understood the true nature of this device. A GPS tracking device. Jennifer muttered in shock. The strength left her knees, and she nearly collapsed to the floor. The beautiful bracelet Patricia had given her wasn't just an accessory. It was a tool to constantly monitor Jennifer's whereabouts. Why? Why would her mother-in-law do this? Various questions swirled in her mind. But right now, there was something she needed to do first. Jennifer took out her smartphone with trembling hands and called 911. Chloe was still crying and trembling slightly next to her mother. Jennifer held her daughter with one arm while holding the phone to her ear with her other hand. The call connected, and she heard the operator's calm voice. 911, what's your emergency? Jennifer took a deep breath and tried to explain the situation as calmly as possible. I found a GPS tracking device hidden inside a bracelet I received from my mother-in-law. Can this be handled as an emergency? After a brief silence, the operator answered. Please stay calm. Can you tell me more about the situation? When did you receive this bracelet and from whom? Jennifer explained that Patricia had brought the bracelet as a birthday present, and that her daughter Chloe had desperately tried to stop her from wearing it. The operator listened carefully and promised to dispatch police officers. After hanging up, Jennifer continued to hold Chloe tightly and asked gently. Her daughter's small body was still trembling, but she seemed to understand that she needed to talk. Chloe, take your time and tell me. How did you know about the bracelet? Chloe looked up and wiped her tear-stained cheeks with the back of her hand. Then she slowly began to speak. Last week, when I went to Grandma's house. Jennifer remembered. On a day when David was away on a business trip, Patricia had offered to watch Chloe. Jennifer had an urgent photo shoot and had accepted the offer. When Grandma was making lunch, I went to the bathroom. When I was coming back, the study door was slightly open. Chloe's voice was small and occasionally broke off. Jennifer squeezed her daughter's hand and encouraged her to continue. I heard Grandma's voice from inside. She was on the phone with someone. She said, now I'll be able to know where Jennifer is at all times. A chill ran down Jennifer's spine. So I looked inside through the gap in the door. There was a big map on the computer screen. There was a red dot on it, and it was moving. Chloe continued in a trembling voice. Grandma said, this bracelet is perfect. Jennifer won't notice. Then a picture of a cafe appeared on the screen. The cafe you went to that morning, Mommy. Jennifer gasped. She had indeed gone to a different cafe than usual that morning for a meeting with a client. She didn't remember telling Patricia about those plans. I was scared. But I couldn't ask Grandma about it. Because I was watching in secret. Tears spilled from Chloe's eyes again. Jennifer hugged her daughter tightly. Thank you for telling me. Chloe, you didn't do anything wrong. You were very brave. The doorbell rang. The police had arrived. Jennifer opened the door while holding Chloe's hand. 2 police officers stood there. An older male officer and a young female officer. Are you Jennifer Collins? We received your call. The older officer spoke in a calm voice. Jennifer led them into the living room and showed them the bracelet and GPS device. The female officer put on gloves and carefully examined the device. This is definitely a GPS tracking device. It's quite sophisticated, the type that can transmit location information in real time. The older officer turned back to Jennifer. Who did you receive this bracelet from? Jennifer took a deep breath. She knew the words she was about to speak would shake the entire family. My mother-in-law. Patricia Collins. She lives nearby. The officers looked at each other. The female officer began taking notes. What's your relationship with your mother-in-law like? Have there been any problems? Jennifer shook her head. No major problems. I did feel she was a bit over-involved sometimes, but I thought that was just a normal relationship with a mother-in-law. The older officer continued with a serious expression. Unfortunately, this may constitute stalking or surveillance. We need to call your mother-in-law in and question her. Jennifer's heart began pounding. She still couldn't believe that what was about to happen was real. The officer called Patricia. 30 minutes later, Patricia arrived at Jennifer's house where the officers were waiting. When the door opened, Patricia stood there with a surprised expression. However, when she saw the police officers in the living room, her expression changed instantly. "What happened, Jennifer? Is Chloe all right?" Patricia's voice seemed to contain genuine concern. But Jennifer wasn't fooled anymore. The older officer stood up. "You're Patricia Collins, correct? Please have a seat. We have some questions." Patricia sat on the sofa and looked at Jennifer. In her eyes floated questions and a hint of wariness. The female officer placed the bracelet and GPS device on the table. "You gave this bracelet to Jennifer, didn't you?" Patricia nodded. "Yes, as a birthday present for my daughter-in-law." "Then can you also explain about the GPS tracking device hidden inside it?" Patricia's face changed color. After a moment of silence, her expression hardened. She must have realized she could no longer hide it. Patricia let out a deep sigh. "Yes, I put it in." Jennifer stared at her mother-in-law in disbelief. She never thought Patricia would admit it so readily. "Why?" Jennifer's voice trembled. Patricia looked straight at Jennifer. In her eyes was not regret, but a kind of conviction. "To protect you." At Patricia's words, the entire room fell silent. "Protect me? By monitoring me with a GPS device?" Anger seeped into Jennifer's voice. Patricia leaned forward. "You don't realize how dangerous a life you're leading. Just because you're freelance, you take photos late at night in unfamiliar places, go alone to dangerous areas. That's my job. And what about Chloe? What if something happens to you?" Patricia's voice grew louder. The older officer intervened. "Ms. Collins, please calm down. Your actions constitute an invasion of privacy, tracking someone's location without their consent." Patricia looked at the officer. "I was just worried about my son's wife. Is protecting one's family a crime? Surveillance without consent is a crime." The female officer answered firmly. While the officers were taking detailed statements from Patricia, Jennifer took Chloe upstairs to the bedroom. Her daughter still looked frightened and was clutching her mother's clothes tightly. "Chloe, it's all right now. Mommy's here." Jennifer sat her daughter on the bed and sat down next to her. Chloe's small hands were cold and trembling. Jennifer wrapped them in both of her hands. "Mommy, what's going to happen to Grandma?" At Chloe's anxious voice, Jennifer was at a loss for words. She still hadn't sorted out the situation herself. Patricia had certainly crossed a line. But she was family. She was David's mother. "I don't know. But the police will handle it appropriately." That was all Jennifer could say. Chloe made herself small in her mother's arms. An hour later, when Jennifer came back downstairs, Patricia was sitting on the sofa with a pale face. The older officer explained to Jennifer. "Miss Collins, your mother-in-law has agreed to voluntarily accompany us to the station. A formal interrogation is necessary." Patricia stood up and looked at Jennifer. Tears welled up in her eyes. "Jennifer, I was just. Please don't say anything more." Jennifer's voice was cold. Patricia bit her lip and silently followed the officers. The sound of the door closing echoed unusually loudly. That night, David came home in an emergency. He had received a call from the police. As soon as he entered, he found Jennifer and rushed over to her. "Jennifer, is it true? My mother was monitoring you." David's face showed an expression of disbelief. Jennifer explained everything. The bracelet, the GPS device, Chloe's testimony, and Patricia's confession. David collapsed onto the sofa. He covered his face with both hands and let out a deep sigh. I can't believe it. That my mother would do something like this. Jennifer sat down next to her husband. David looked up and met his wife's eyes. Jennifer, I'm truly sorry. That my mother made you go through something like this. It's not your fault. Jennifer took her husband's hand. However, somewhere in her heart, questions swirled. Did David really not know anything? The next morning, Jennifer was called to the police station. David accompanied her. In the interrogation room, the female officer explained the detailed situation. Patricia Collins purchased the GPS tracking device about 3 months ago. It's something legally sold online, but depending on the purpose of use, it becomes illegal. Jennifer gasped. 3 months ago. She had received the bracelet just a week ago. What had Patricia been doing in the time between? The officer continued. When we examined her computer, we found detailed records of your movements. Places visited, length of stay, frequently visited locations. Everything was recorded. Jennifer felt dizzy. David supported her shoulder. So what will happen to my mother? David asked. The officer answered while looking at the documents. We can prosecute this as stalking. However, it depends on whether Jennifer files a complaint. Jennifer and David looked at each other. If she filed a complaint, Patricia could potentially be formally charged. But that would completely tear the family apart. That afternoon, Jennifer and David met with Patricia. Patricia sat in a chair in the detention room with a haggard face. She looked like she had aged 10 years overnight. Mom. David's voice trembled. Patricia looked at her son and shed tears. David, I'm sorry. Why did you do something like this? Anger and sadness mixed in David's voice. Patricia took a deep breath and slowly began to speak. Ever since your father died, I've been overwhelmed with anxiety. The fear of losing family has been in my heart all along. David's father had died suddenly of a heart attack 5 years ago. For Patricia, it was the most painful event in her life. When I knew Jennifer was working late into the night, I couldn't stop worrying. If something happened to her, what would happen to you and Chloe? I would lose someone precious again. Patricia's voice was intermittent. So I thought if I at least knew where she was, I could help her immediately if something happened. I just wanted to protect her. Jennifer looked at Patricia with mixed feelings. Certainly, Patricia's actions were inexcusable. However, at the root of it, though in a distorted form, was love for family. I'm not saying I can't understand your feelings. Jennifer began to speak quietly. But surveillance isn't love. It's control. I have the right to live my own life. Even if you're worried, no one has the right to invade my privacy. Patricia silently shed tears. Jennifer continued. Think about Chloe. That child trusted you, and now she's full of feelings of betrayal. An 8-year-old child spent her days carrying such a heavy secret. At those words, Patricia covered her face. She continued crying with her shoulders shaking. David spoke up. Mom, we're family. But I can't forgive what you did this time. I think you need professional help. Patricia looked up at her son. I know. I was pathological. I couldn't stop myself. Jennifer and David left the visiting room. In the hallway, they stood in silence for a long time. Jennifer, what do you want to do? David asked. Jennifer looked out the window. The autumn sky was clear, and the leaves on the trees swayed in the wind. I won't file a complaint. But I have conditions. Jennifer looked at her husband. Patricia needs to receive counseling. And for the time being, she needs to keep her distance from us. Until Chloe's emotional wounds heal. David nodded. I think that's right. Mom should do that too. The two left the police station. From now on, the family would have to take a long time to heal this wound. However, Jennifer believed that with time, perhaps someday a day would come when she could forgive. 3 months passed. Winter came to Connecticut, and the trees in the yard had completely shed their leaves. Jennifer was editing family photos for a client in her home studio. As she looked at the smiling family on the screen, she thought about her own family. Since that day, Patricia had continued attending sessions with a professional counselor as promised. For the first month, neither Jennifer nor David had any contact with her at all. Chloe also avoided the topic of her grandmother. However, last week, they received a call from Patricia's counselor. Patricia was seriously facing her problems and was showing significant progress. And she had requested to write a letter of apology to the family. David consulted with Jennifer. They talked for a long time. And they decided to ask for Chloe's opinion as well. Chloe, a letter might come from Grandma. Do you want to read it? When Jennifer asked gently, Chloe thought for a moment and then nodded. Yeah. I wonder if Grandma's okay. At her daughter's words, Jennifer felt a bit relieved. Changes seemed to be gradually occurring in Chloe's heart as well. 2 days later, a letter from Patricia arrived. It was a long, 3-page letter that expressed her deep remorse, her love for her family, and her understanding of her own mistakes. In particular, the words of apology to Chloe couldn't be read without tears. That weekend, Jennifer and David made a decision. They would allow a meeting with Patricia. However, they decided it would be brief at first and only with the counselor present. On the day of the meeting, Patricia carried a different atmosphere than before. Her clothing was modest, and her expression held gentleness and humility. She first knelt down in front of Chloe. Chloe, I'm truly sorry. Grandma frightened you and made you feel sad. Chloe seemed a bit tense, but she looked into her grandmother's eyes and answered. Grandma, you won't do scary things anymore, will you? Never. I promise. Patricia gently hugged her granddaughter while shedding tears. Jennifer felt her eyes growing hot as she watched the scene. After the meeting ended, on the drive home, David said, Mom is trying to change. She's serious about it. Jennifer nodded. Yes. But we'll take our time, little by little. David squeezed his wife's hand. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm grateful for your generosity. Jennifer looked out the window. The winter landscape was harsh, but spring would surely come eventually. It was the same with family. Even wounded relationships could be reborn in a new form with time and effort. That night, as Jennifer was putting Chloe to bed, she asked, Chloe, how did you feel about seeing Grandma today? Chloe thought for a moment before answering. Grandma really is sorry, isn't she? That's right. Grandma properly understood how wrong what she did was. Chloe closed her eyes peacefully in her mother's arms. Mommy, family is complicated, isn't it? Jennifer smiled. Yes. But it's precious. Even if it's not perfect, if we can care for each other, admit our mistakes, and forgive one another, family can continue. Chloe had already fallen asleep. Jennifer kissed her daughter's forehead and left the room. Downstairs, David was waiting with coffee. They sat side by side on the sofa and spent a quiet evening. The bracelet was now in the police evidence storage. Someday the day would come when it would be returned. Jennifer hadn't yet decided what she would do with it then. However, there was one thing that was certain. That bracelet had become a painful lesson for the family. And from that lesson, they were gradually beginning to build stronger bonds.